Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Senior News Editor with Retail Insider. Joining me today is Mason Lamb and Ron Odadaki, who are with JLL. Ron specializes in the retail sector, Mason in the office sector. Thanks, gents, for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Mario.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, you guys put out an interesting report recently on the situation in Calgary with downtown parking. Tell me, first of all, just some of the key findings from that report.
Thanks, Mario. So some of the key findings that we did release in this report was just, overall, I think that Calgary has some of the highest parking in North America. And we're behind some major markets such as like New York and San Francisco, but that's about it. And a lot of the questions that stem from this are like, why is that the case? Like, why is Calgary so high in contrast with a lot of these major markets? And that was kind of the thrust of it. And overall, I mean, it's a very simple answer from our perspective. There's just not enough supply, given the volume of traffic that comes into downtown every day. We have a very limited supply, and Calgary is very dense in the sense that the majority of jobs are actually in the core. So yeah, there's great need for this parking to be in the core, and frankly, there's not enough.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, Ron, what that means for the retail perspective.
Well, I think what we've seen here is that the number of vehicles that are coming into the downtown core are lower than what they were at pre-pandemic levels. You couple that with LRT ridership and pedestrians and cyclists, and all the data suggests, and certainly just being downtown, you can see that the traffic is not where it was prior to the pandemic. What it means for retail is fewer people during the day. This has an impact on retail sales, and therefore probably in terms of a retail sales and rental recovery, that the downtown is lagging behind, let's say the suburban market, where I think there's a lot stronger indications in terms of retail growth.
Mm-hmm. And Mason, in terms of the parking situation, what does that mean for the office sector?
Well, it kind of means the same thing that we've always faced, as you know. Like, we've been here for at least a couple of decades, and we know the parking's never come down. It's always been quite high. Yeah. The one thing that we have seen, although this is the same stories as we've seen 5, 10, even 20 years ago, doesn't have a material impact because a lot of people have become accustomed to it. And that's the real thrust of it. It's not like it really made an impact in terms of employees trying to negotiate them into contracts, because frankly, it was already an issue at the forefront. I think what we've seen over the past 7 years is with the decline of offices and conversions starting to happening, especially in the West End, you're starting to see a bit more parking that's at a lower cost there. And really, we've had these conversations in the past, Mario, where we've talked about a tale of two cities. You have the center core A buildings that haven't really performed and haven't really suffered as significant as the West End. And with Calgary's new development incentive program, where they're incentivizing all these conversions, it's really yet to be known what kind of impact they'll have on parking, because the city's never been a fan of pushing a high amount of parking. They've really been transit oriented. They've really been pedestrian oriented. They've really been bike lane oriented. And it's kind of counterintuitive given how much revenue they get from parking. So we'll see how the city really plays this out over the next couple of years as we start to see more of these conversions occurring.
Yeah, and Ron, maybe you could answer this one. What about the transit situation and people using transit to get downtown? How important is that, or what have you seen in that area?
Well, I think it's just to be able to find different modes of transportation that allow for the downtown worker. the downtown with any entertainment event that may be happening, the Calgary Stampede, any of the conferences and conventions and so on and so forth, that you need various ways to get to a large number of people in a certain geography, almost, in many cases at the same time. When you take a look actually between 2021 and 2022, the increase in traffic in all modes of transportation, with possibly the exception of pedestrians, which has been fairly sustained between 21 and 22, there's been a market increase in that traffic. So that probably has an impact on how building owners are looking at their parking situation in terms of supply and demand. Demands come back up again. I think there's a much more sustained traffic during the day as it comes to the daytime office worker, with the conventions coming back, with conferences and tourism coming back, that the downtown core is now becoming again an important part of playing into being part of that experience. So I think it's important for transit to be part of that, for rideshare, taxi, making sure that all of these modes of transportation are available to all different users of the downtown. For parking, speaking to parking in specific, where you have somebody that is not working downtown, but is coming for a different experience, for retail, for restaurant, being able to find parking conveniently, understanding where it is, how close it is, and being seamlessly getting into that parking stall. I think that's part of the experience that we need to make sure that allows that downtown visitor to be able to enjoy that experience when coming.
Now,
And Mario, just to add on to that as well, availability is one thing and safety is another. And that seems to be top of mind for, you see it in a lot of media outlets as well, just safety, not just in Calgary, but in Edmonton, and access to these public transit. If you don't have the safety component, as available as it may be, people will not take it. Yeah. And Calgary's always been our car-focused culture. Like, growing up here, most of the time you're driving everywhere because mass transit was just never readily available. Yeah. With the Green Line coming into play here, starting in 2026, it will be available within the next decade. However, the city and the province overall needs to just put a greater focus on the safety and ridership. So if you build it, will they come? Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. It just depends on how safe they feel, really.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just thinking of that when Ron was speaking. And we've gone through and going through a lot of process here in Calgary with redefining or reinvigorating Stephen Avenue, right? And lots of talk from the city on that. But my way of thinking, I think if the downtown is not safe, or even perceived to be not safe, that's you could talk about doing number of things, right, with the downtown, but I think that's got to be the number one issue, right? And you mentioned Edmonton, and not to slam our neighbors from up north, but man, I spent a couple of times up there in the summer, and in downtown and around that Edmonton city center area, the mall, like holy smoke, like why would anybody from the suburbs want to come down there, right? And in many ways, I don't know, maybe you guys could talk about this, but in many ways, I'm feeling that's happening, not to the same extent in downtown Calgary as in other downtown centers across the country. But how does that impact both the office sector and both the retail sector when people don't feel safe coming down?
Well, I can answer from an office perspective, and you hit the nail right on the head, Mario. It is a major concern. And the good thing about Calgary is that there was a big push for return to office. Yeah. And with the amount of people starting to come back into the core, you typically don't see, or maybe that's the wrong term. It's not that you don't see as much of the transient population anymore. It becomes a little more muted. And as a result of that, there's a perception of safety. So people are typically more willing to kind of walk around on the streets, and you're going to see a lot more developments of retail where there's just frankly just more population. So from an office perspective, that's the one thing that Calgary has that a lot of the other cities didn't push for as much, was a lot of these oil and gas companies, they're not big fans of this hybrid work environment. They'll give you the flexibility. However, working a couple of days from home, it's been, I'd say 50-50. There's some companies that are absolutely mandated 5 days back in the office because it becomes part of their culture and, you know, productivity. And there's a lot of metrics out there that you can argue both ways, but, you know, this is the stance that certain management has taken. And as a result, you know, one of the benefits is that we've seen an increase in the perception of safety just being downtown versus just a very empty downtown, which you kind of see more in a lot of these metropolises where there is going to be a perception of safety issues.
I think with and bringing it back to parking as well, the more vibrant and the busier that the parking parkades and open lots become, there is that, you know, increased traffic, increased number of eyeballs that are there, perhaps that give that perception that, you know, there are people there, people are watching, and possibly that you know, tries to mute that element of lack of safety. What I wanted to say as well from a retail perspective is, in order to get more traffic to retailers and retail shops and services, you know, what happens before and after hours? Is there a breakfast component or an early morning component? Is there an evening component? You know, dining out, restaurants, entertainment, residential. Is there a residential component where there's that type of traffic downtown that compels people to be out and spending money at retail? My point again with conventions and conferences and festivals that provide a more dynamic view of the downtown core that allows, and maybe with that we can help understand what that impact that has on evening parking rates, weekend parking rates, and availability and ease of access and security, and all of these things I think is important. And that helps the retailer as well to understand where their sales are going to be and how much rent they can pay. And as well for the landlords to understand the rents that they think they can command for their properties.
All right. Thanks very much, guys, for joining us today.
Thanks, Mario.
Thank you, Mario.
All right, that was Mason Lamb and Ron Odadaki, who are with JLL in Calgary. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Senior News Editor with Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.